The following broadcast is a presentation of Mount Zion Media Ministry.
Verse 2, Joshua chapter 3. And it came to pass after 3 days that the officers went through the host, and they commanded the people, saying, when ye see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priest and the Levite bearing it, then ye shall remove from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near unto it, that ye may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. And Joshua said unto the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among us. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. Y'all are a good-looking audience tonight. And next time somebody tell you people don't go to church, said they do, because we were in church the other night. The subject of the sermon tonight, how to thrive in the midst of transition. How to thrive in the midst of transition. I want to do a little prophesying before I get to this text tonight. The members of Mount Zion say I have this way of starting out slow. So for the visitors, I'm going to start slow tonight. They say I start out slow, then I speed up. So let me just warn you, I need you to stay awake. Because what I'm getting ready to say might not move you, but I hope you will hear me. Because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. Prophetically, what I want to say to you is that we ought to be thankful for 2019, and as we go into this year, this new year, we got much to celebrate. But we cannot go into 2020 as we've gone into years before. Last year, for example, as I preached, as I had in other years, and I said to you, here's a plan for the next year. And we looked at life and plans and visions in a one-year period. And I want to say to you that as we go into 2020, you've got to stretch that, and you've got to look at the whole decade from 2020 to 2030. And what I want you to hear me and hear me well, that decade is going to be the decade of transition. You write it down, I'm telling you. Change is going to happen at a rate that we have never seen in the history of mankind. The way we live, the way we operate, how we define life, everything about us is going to change. And those persons who are not equipped, who are not agile, who are not flexible enough to shift and make adjustments in the change will not thrive. This shift is going to create a group of people in our culture, and not just America, but around the world, who will thrive and do well. Prosperity will take on a new definition. But it's also going to create a new group of people who are going to be impoverished, and it won't be because racism or sexism or any other ism other than you just couldn't make the shift. You were thinking too small. You said, if I can just get from 2020 to 21, I'll be okay. But you got to look at this as the whole decade. See, in the past, change took years sometimes. But now major change is going to happen in a month. What used to take 3 years will take 3 weeks. And you can see some of it now. So for example, the other day I was ordering something online from my phone, and it gave me a choice, and I see my post woman here. She's my mailman. It said, "Do you want to get it regular mail?" And this was like the 31st, and it said I would get it January 8th. Or we can get it to you today or tomorrow. What in the normal economy would take me 8 days to get, they said if I needed it, they get it to me the same day. AI, artificial intelligence, is going to transform the way that we operate, the technology and all that will come to that. It's going to transform it such that that degree you got now will be irrelevant. And so you're going to have to retool. You're going to have to recreate yourself in order to be a valuable person in the new economy. Listen. The American school system is going to have to transform because the way that we currently educate children in this next decade will be obsolete. We will be graduating students that are not fit for the world that they are going to live in. Let me give you an example. We are, and this is one from 10 years ago, but we are training students to work individually and figure complex problems on their own with very little tools. I take the test by myself. Nowhere in this current economy is anybody asked to work and solve problems by themselves. Nowhere in this economy are people not given tools. If I got a math problem, I got a calculator or something. And so I've never worked as a team, always trying to solve it by myself. And so now I'm sitting in the middle of a group with folk, and I don't know how to work with them. And they're using tools and they're solving problems in ways that I have never seen because I was trained in a system to be an individual. Medicine will change. You won't have to go to the doctor's office. You know, y'all call it the Antichrist, when money will be obsolete. But you won't need money. You won't need credit cards. Your body will be the credit card. Your body will be the money. Those of you that work behind the cash register at my favorite grocery store, Publix, they won't need you. When I walk through the door with my groceries, they will know what I got. They read me and charge it to me and take it from wherever the money is. You know, my grandchildren are in my office sleep. That's where Diane is. She's back there with the grandchildren, and we go back and forth about who they look like. But listen, those grandchildren will be able to go to a place and pick a baby. Pick his eyes, his ears, his height, his sex, his intelligence, and everything about it. And let me just say real quick, and I'll go ahead and preach that over the next 10 years, that Range Rover I got going to be a joke. House I live in going to be a joke because it's going to be outdated. And y'all thought the Jetsons was just a cartoon. But I'm going to be flying over y'all. and our children and those of us that can't adapt, we're going to be left behind in this transition. And so we're going to have to make ourselves. And let me tell you something, two other things. One is, it has nothing to do with technology. It's a culture shift. There was a time when there were clear lines about people's identity. And right now those lines are being blurred, but in this next decade, they're going to be redefined. The days of having a box on your application where they ask you if you're male or female will be gone. And you can sit here as the church and talk about it as long as you want to and say how evil it is. The truth is, it's coming. Just look at commercials you see, and family is being redefined. Marriage is being redefined. What is a valuable life is being redefined. And all this ethnicity stuff is going to disappear. And so, because we're going to be so blended and so mixed, and nobody will be able to lay claim on America as my country. And not just America, but the world. And all of these cultures will blend together. And as they blend together, there's going to be the creation of a new culture. And listen real close. And even the shift that's already happening and the shift that's coming is going to make it worse for the church, because the church is always slower than other institutions, if I can call the church an institution, of catching up. And so churches are dying and closing because there's been a shift in culture and we hadn't decided how we're going to define it. We've not decided how we're going to work with it. A friend of mine, Jeffrey Johnson, we had a conversation. We were in Shreveport, Louisiana, and one of the things that we've got to do is redefine what a church member is. Jeffrey pastors a church in Indiana in 3 locations, and he has a bigger congregation online who claim membership to his church than he has in his pews on Sunday. Jeffrey has income of about $1.2 million from members who claim membership, who live around the world, who never step foot in his church. And the question is, how do you minister to those kind of folk? So I'm telling you, what you're going to see in this next decade and how this world operates, and it's going to shrink. And it's not just going to be us down here in the dirty South, but it's going to be us and the world. And how do we operate, and how do we work with other people as these cultures come together without creating new walls of hatred? And can I say to you, the politics of creating fear by creating this war between us and them is going to have to go. Yeah. Because us and them are going to be in the same house. And so you got to get ready. I know you Republicans and Democrats now, but y'all Republicans are going to go where y'all need to go, and you Democrats going to know where you need to go. And I could tell you, but I promise not to talk like that no more in church. So here is what I want to say. So here is what I want to say. We who are believers need to understand that we need to step up to the plate and be prepared for this next decade and all of this transition that will happen, and not be afraid of it. Because while all the transition is happening, this book will help us interpret the transition and thrive in it. I heard this Jewish lady on a radio talk show say something that I thought was profound. And she was talking about how every other generation or so, those of us who are people of faith have to look at the Bible and reinterpret it within the context of the world we lived in. And she gave the example of how in the Jewish world, there was a time when they took literally the teaching an eye for an eye. And so if you did something to me in that context, I just pluck your eye out. In other words, there was this model of revenge. But then she said, but we reinterpret it to mean, if I injured you, then I ought to compensate you financially. And not literally take your eye out, but you ought to compensate me for whatever the injury is you did to me. And so how do we do that? It's in there. So what I want to do now is take this text and show you how you can thrive in the midst of this transition. And let me just say this to the members of Mount Zion. I need you to buckle up and open your minds, because we are going to have to reinvent ourselves as a church if we're going to thrive and meet the needs of the people that God has sent us to serve. So here it is. So how do we do it? How do we do it? In this text that I read, there's a word in verse 4. When he said to them, I want you to, when you get ready to cross this Jordan River, I want you to stay close, to look at this Ark of the Covenant for leadership, for direction on how to cross over to the other side. Because the way you're going, you never passed before. And so, brothers and sisters, when you find yourself going into a place that you've never been before, and this decade is going to be unlike anything we've seen, what I want to say to you is there's a word from the Lord. The children of Israel in this text are people who were in bondage in Egypt. Praise team from Baraka sang this song about this is my Exodus. And so in the book of Exodus, God brought them out. But listen, God does not bring you out unless God has somewhere to take you into. And God promised to take them into the land of Canaan. And unfortunately, we have made Canaan all about heaven. But Canaan is not just about heaven, but Canaan stands for God's people coming out of bondage and going into the promised inheritance. God promised Abraham that his seed would inherit this land that they're going to possess, and it represents their inheritance, their rest, and their prosperity. And God has brought them out of bondage and taking them into their inheritance. Symbolically, it speaks to us in the New Testament, it speaks to us who are part of the church, that God brought us out of our bondage. But he was too good to just bring us out. But we have an inheritance. Let me say that again, because some of you never got an inheritance. Your folk die and leave you broke. But we have an inheritance. I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. We are already blessed in heavenly places with all of the riches and the glory that God has to give. God has a place of promise for you and for me. And as we go into the new decade, whatever transitions come does not interfere with God's ability to take us into our inheritance, to give us our rest, to give us our prosperity. And if you want to go there, you see, part of our inheritance is to be the head and not the tail. Part of our inheritance is to be above and not beneath. Part of our inheritance is to be the lender and not the borrower. Part of our inheritance is joy that the world cannot give. Joy, unspeakable joy. Part of our inheritance is to share in all of the riches that our salvation through Jesus Christ brought to us. And listen, God loves you too much to let you live and catch hell down here all your life. And the only heaven you get to enjoy is when you go to heaven. His kingdom has already come in the earth. And God wants us to walk in his kingdom and benefit from our kingdom citizenship, and that's part of our inheritance. But how do you get there? In the midst of this transition. And I'm backing into this text. And so, if you look at verse 5, he gives them some instructions. He says to them, sanctify yourself. For tomorrow God is going to do some wonderful things. And what is God getting ready to do? He's getting ready to take them across the Jordan River, which represents them going into their inheritance, their rest, and their prosperity. But before God could take them in, they had to sanctify themselves. And so wake up and write this down. What you're going to have to do, if you're going to thrive in this decade of transition, you got to sanctify yourself. What are you talking about, preacher? That word sanctify means to be set aside for a particular purpose. And the purpose is God's purpose. And so you've got a purpose in your mind that you're going to be set aside to thrive in the purpose of God. That no matter what happened, no matter what's happening around you, that the God you serve is able to help you, is able to open doors for you so that you can make the necessary adjustments that need to be made so that you can become who you need to become as you retool and recreate yourself, because you have sanctified yourself not for failure, but for success. And can I tell you, for some people, that's the hardest part, because there's something that's in our DNA that we cannot get it in our mind that we are supposed to be blessed and highly favored. That we have an inheritance that is ours. We always have an excuse. Your color cannot be an excuse. Your gender cannot be an excuse. Your lack of education, you got too much education, all of the things that you've used for excuses, the side of town you live on. I come from a single parent home. Those are things that people of the world told you. If God has sanctified you for purpose, God is bigger than anything that folks say will make you disadvantaged. Don't you know people play games with you? And so, you got to sanctify your mind to start believing and living like a person who knows that you've been set aside to be blessed and highly favored. People who don't know me, they don't know what I got in the bank. Pastor Smith, they say I'm rich. And they don't know what I got. But what they don't know is I act like I'm rich because I have been sanctified and purposed in my mind that I'm wealthy and highly favored. And my wealth is not determined by my bank account. But I know what my daddy owns. And if my daddy owns it, then I got access to it. And my daddy will take care of me. You are not as good as God. But if your children walk around bare feet, if you any kind of parent, you're going to put some shoes on their feet. They outdoors. They call you daddy. We've been put out. If you're any kind of man, you're going to put a roof over their head. And God is greater than any of us. And you're going to tell me God will sit back and let his children. And so sanctify yourself to thrive in this transition, and you approach every situation with the attitude, I got this. Get your swagger on. Okay, y'all shifting the economy. It ain't paper money. That's all right. I got this. Okay, y'all shifting the work world, and so now I gotta get a new skill, a new this. That's all right. I got this. And so, listen. He said to them, sanctify them. Something else I want to show you. Then I'm going to move to the next thing. Not only were the individuals asked to sanctify themselves, but when they lined up to go, everybody in the crowd had sanctified themselves for the same purpose. Let me see if I can say that so you can get it. There was nobody in the crowd who had not sanctified themselves to go across. Because if you're going to be sanctified and go across that way you've never been before to get what you've never had before, then you got to make sure the crowd you're in is the right crowd. See, listen at me. There's some folk that's in your crowd. You got to cut them. Listen. Grown folk, you got to stop trying to raise. Grown folk, you got to stop pulling along. You broke down and heavy loaded because you got a grown person on your shoulder. I'm trying to help them. I'm trying to change them. Ooh, I wish I could go back to my old self. You can't change nobody. You ain't in the save. God didn't send you to be the Messiah to save folk. Stop hanging on to dead weight. Stop hanging to somebody who sanctified themselves for failure. How can two walk together except they agree? And listen, doesn't mean you better than other folk, but if we're not going the same place. Listen, I talk to anybody. If you see me on the corner, you see me in the grocery, I'll stop and hold a conversation. But if I'm riding to Atlanta, I'm not riding with anybody. I don't want to spend 2.5 hours talking with a crazy person. I don't want to spend 2.5 hours talking to somebody who's negative stuff coming out your mouth all the time. All you got to do is talk about people. Who you hanging with? Show me the 5 people you hanging with and I'll show you where you'll be in 5 years. Get in the crowd with some sanctified folk whose purpose is the same as yours.
Thanks for watching. Be blessed and continue walking in the light.